turning imagination into reality and giving this sort of process actual, genuine energy. Imagination itself is energy, wherein which some abilities have a way of converting imagination into actual, legitimate, tangible things. There are some concepts that are very intriguing in this arc for One Piece, but unfortunately, you can easily argue they haven't gotten the time they deserve. And instead, we're more focused on saving the Vegapunks from their current predicament instead of buckling down and diving even deeper into the mysteries of energy and technology in the world of One Piece. So it is a good thing, I suppose, that we are gonna hopefully have Vegapunks come with us on the journey to Elbaf. But there is a lot of postulation, low-key in this arc, that I think is very important, and it ties to certain characters' dreams and potentially quintessential for the main character himself. In chapter 1062, when Alice talks about touching a hologram with her light pressure gloves, and how Luffy was confused, like, hold on, so is that lady, that hologram that you just touched, are they real or fake? And then Alice responds by saying, whether it's real or not, up to you, Luffy, to decide. If you ask me, those words are of a relic of a bygone age. And these words that she says, I think, harken back, like really, really strongly, to what was stated in chapter 218, when the giant galleon ship, before Jaya, almost landed on the merry-go. And then you have the narration quote, where they say, anything man can imagine is a possibility in reality. The narration is quoting someone named Willie Garon or Willie Karen, according to the Viz translation, someone that we do not see at all in the story, at least so far, but they are a physicist in the world of One Piece. The fact that that ship, the St. Brice, sailed 200 plus years ago, around the same time when the giant robot also invaded the Holy Land, those two things could coincide some way. But for me, what I want to hone on again is the idea of anything that man can imagine is possible in reality. And to me, this idea goes well in lockstep with the idea that Alice talks about, where what is real or not, it's up for you to decide. Meaning that in some ways, the technology and their ideas and their theories are so advanced that what is quote unquote imaginary, what is quote unquote fake, could genuinely be real, given perception, given technology, and of course, given the capabilities of what man can imagine. Whether it's an actual literal thing where imagination itself has energy, or there has to be conduits for man's imagination to become energy and then can be applied and utilized in the real world, hence reality. I would say that both these things in One Piece could exist at the exact same time. So think about how on Egghead Island right now, we have anti-gravity tech, which allows for huge structures and objects to move, even fly, despite their size. Consider the fact that you have a nuclear fusion reactor, one of the power plants, the main power plant that like creates the mother flame that the Gorosei are currently targeting. Nuclear fusion is extremely advanced technology, and here we have the Vegapunks using that along with anti-gravity tech to completely change the ecosystem of a winter island into a summer island, which normally is impossible. But here it is happening in broad daylight. Their theories of, for example, in chapter 1065, Lilith talks about an undying flame. What does it even mean? A flame that potentially has infinite energy, infinite power. And with this quote-unquote undying flame, they could even create their own sun. Again, the scope of power and their imagination and the tech is off the charts. The idea that Vegapunk talks about a sea of knowledge, where this sea wouldn't be necessarily seen, but anyone in the world could access this vast sea of knowledge for any information they wanted, aka the mental internet across the entire globe. Mentioned in chapter 1067. These are concepts that, again, are really far-reaching, but at the same time, they are well within the possibilities of what man could imagine. Imagination becoming reality. All you need is the conduits, the energy, the process to convert it in order to make it reality. There is an idea that's brought up in chapter 1072, where Vegapunk mentions a scholar in the West Blue who mentioned the idea that people lose 21 grams of weight after they die, and that weight is the weight of the human soul. Now, this harkens back to an actual experiment that was done in the early 1900s by Duncan McDougall called the 21-gram experiment. But essentially speaking, the idea is that something like the soul, in layman's terms, is astral. It is beyond the scope of what normal humans should be able to perceive. But if the soul has mass, if it has weight, 21 grams of weight, then it becomes way more possible for humans to interact, to manipulate, to understand what the soul truly is. Because the soul has tangible, physical mass. And in that very same chapter, Vegapunk uses Bartholomew Kuma's abilities to try and convert memories, things that normally don't have mass or any substance to them, but the electrical charges between neurons in the brain. He is able to take something of that sort and apply mass and apply physical substance to it. The same thing goes for pain. Let's say, for example, someone could do happiness, someone could do sadness, someone could do fear. Bartholomew Kuma, in theory, could take a lot of these intangible things that are not meant to have mass and substance beyond human comprehension in terms of manipulate and touch them and feel them. Bartholomew Kuma converts the intangible into tangible and applies mass and substance to them. Devil fruits are a process in which you can convert intangible things, things that have no substance, into tangible things. We've seen devil fruit powers do very wonky, particularly the paramecia, do very wonky and zany things that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. Like, for example, Sugar, when she turns into a toy, every human across the planet is able to forget about your very existence. Thereby, Sugar's powers are able to somehow affect the entire globe. Remember before we talked about the soul and how the idea is that when the soul leaves the body loses 21 grams of mass. Well, what if, for example, Brook and Perona have that process happen to them when they go into their astral sort of forms? When Brook is that ghost, that green ghost, and flies around, when Perona leaves her body, what if her main body's also losing 21 grams? The same thing for Brook and his bones. 21 grams is gone. And we're able to see their astral projected forms because their powers are converting their souls in certain ways where they're actually visible. And by some folks, let's say like Big Mom, because of her soul powers, potentially tangible as well. Weird things on a fundamental energy molecular level have always been the case in One Piece. And as we get deeper to the story, we get more and more of the nitty-gritty, the details. And I'd argue part of those details come in part with Vegapunk's dream. In chapter 1068, Vegapunk unveils his dream about energy and how just reaching out, it's there. You can feel it, you can touch it, and it's all around them. The world itself is positively brimming with energy. Take it, it's yours! But the issue is finding a way of converting that said energy and giving it to people across the world to have infinite or free energy at will. But like I said before, we already know that there is a way to do that in some sense with the devil fruit. The devil fruit in some way can convert the intangible into the tangible. So let's say going back to Sugar in a roundabout way, her powers could be affecting the infinite energy around them in some way that allows her to erase the existence, the memories of a person that is turned into a toy from everybody else's mind. That is within the realm, absolutely a possibility. And I think part of the root cause of this is how the fruits themselves were created. In chapter 1069, when Vegapunk has his speech about how the fruits came into existence, the cornerstone line, I think, is at the end of that speech where he says that they were dreamed up by somebody else before them. The powers were created, quote unquote, dreamed up And this idea of imagining the powers into existence or imagination needed some sort of conduit, some sort of conversion process, whether it was tech or the forces, and then the fruits were created. We don't know per se, and that'll be another video into the future. However, the idea ultimately could be that imagination itself is energy. Right now, in the world of One Piece, people are incapable of manipulating that energy, or it does various things, but they don't understand it per se. But it is possible that imagination is energy, and that energy could be converted into actual substance, mass to actually hold on to. And then that mass, that energy of imagination is the foundation of the devil fruit powers, dreamed up by somebody else before them. Just how feelings like sadness, pain itself, memories can be converted into mass. So in theory, when it comes to the infinite energy that's all around them, that's already there in the world of One Piece, imagination, the voice of all things, soul-related powers, inherited will, these things could all be tangible in some way, in some retrospect. But like with the light pressure gauntlets Atlas has, being able to touch what is untouchable, light itself, holograms, photons, there could have been a way, there are ways to potentially interact, manipulate, touch the inherited will, the imagination of the people of the world of One Piece, the energy that is freely existent in the world itself. Listen, all this to say that I think this arc, even though it's not a major focus, and I really wish it was, I think in fundamental ways, it has expanded the scope of the scientific bedrock of the story, absolutely. That we can then use to branch off into more of the unknown, quote-unquote, supernatural aspects of the story. Because ultimately, you can argue that these supernatural elements are all in the spectrum of science in the world of One Piece and tech. Like, for example, when the elders touch down onto the island, Agate Island, I don't think that they're actually using magic. I would say that the bedrock, like for so many things in the story, is still technology, energy, and soul, which then ties into other planes of existence oriented, not mana. But the technology and the science has to get to the point where it can manipulate, maneuver, interact with these quote-unquote intangible, ever-existent energies and forces. Consider the fact that Vegapunk himself said, with his tech, he could literally create all of these Zoan abilities if he had the money and the time to do so. The resources and the time, that's what he would need, but he could create essentially every Zoan ability that is in existence. I've argued that even though his tech is fantastic, he is not on the level of the people of the past, the ancient kingdom of yore 900 years ago, where they were ahead, because they could do, in theory, the Logias and the Paramecias too, no problem. Again, imagine up by someone else before them, and that before, I bet, was before the Void Century. Each and every power probably categorized in the ancient Devil Fruit Encyclopedia. So, oh, yes, listen, this video may not make much sense to most people, fair enough, fine, I can understand that. And in some ways, I am a bit, you know, nerdgasming, true. And you could also argue that in some way, what I'm describing is like a Star Wars force. Not necessarily, though to be fair, I'm not that Star Wars deep, so I'm not too sure what the force can and cannot do. You go like this, guys go like, whoa, and then they turn around like nothing happened. And then you can stop ships, the force, and so on and so forth. But that's all I really know. The idea ultimately, though, is that because of what's happening on Agate Island, even though it's not a major focus, you can argue, because we had the Seraphim and we had Rob Lucci versus Luffy, we've had all these crazy fights, we've cut away from the island itself to go over to Garp and Kuzan, Shanks and Kid, the elders are here, so like, yeah, obviously all things are happening that are like that are insane and zany and so on. But the fundamentals, I think, are also being improved too in this arc, in more ways than you would expect. particularly scientifically. And so I am hoping that, once again, we do get more details about these sort of things when the Vegapunks are temporarily on the crew until, let's say, we get to Elbaf. And also, I would argue, in some ways, actually probably in a lot of ways, Luffy is a major, absolutely quintessential representative of the idea of imagination, reality. Especially as of late, with the paintbrush and the bucket of paint and all these crazy things. But in a general sense, these things can apply in various unique ways across the spectrum. And like Luffy is the potential pinnacle, like, bro, this guy's kind of stupid. And then also, obviously, the idea of hockey transcending all things could apply in some way too to all this, but I won't make it too much of a long video. Only time can tell. So, on that note, let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys on the flip side.
See you. Bye-bye.